Warning, the following program contains critical thinking, honest opinions, viewpoints on culture that may seem conservative, and a positive view on absolute detestable things such as marriage and children. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morrow, ladies and gentlemen, in the Americas and in the UKs or whatever. I don't know. I didn't know how I was going to start this episode. Probably should have scripted it. It's fine. Anyways, last week I was out and about for work and I saw something that's been kind of rare in my experience with rural Tennessee thus far. You see, there's this plant, okay, that people started growing like 2 years ago, maybe. Anyways, up until this point, to my knowledge, I thought this plant only grew out of like concrete and asphalt in cities, in parking lots. However, I was wrong because I was just traipsing along and in the mud and the grass, in the beauty of nature, okay, intertwined in all of that wonderful disgustingness, I saw a very gross disposable mask.
Oh, that is the joke.
And I was like, ew, I don't like that. But you know, I'm an adult, and as such, I know how to handle my own emotions. Thank you. Um, and you know, so I don't like it. There's things I don't like. That's how life works. There's a lot of things that I don't like. One of those things being when one of our Tennessee U.S. senators makes a New Year's post about all the things that they've accomplished in the U.S. Senate over the previous year. Yeah, and one of those things is repealing the COVID mandates for the military. And I don't know. I mean, that's great and all. I'm glad it's not a mandate anymore. But what about all of the people who already got fired? Okay, like okay, before we even get to the people who got fired, what about all the people who were already backed into a corner and got the vaccine because they didn't want to lose their livelihoods? Okay, even though if they had the option to keep their job without getting the vaccine, they wouldn't have. What about those people? And then also, what about all the people who were discharged from the military over the last year, okay, before the mandate was repealed? What about all the people who made the decision to sacrifice their comfort and a stable family lifestyle in order to serve our country and the values that we technically stand for, okay, who had to completely rework their entire lives? They had to completely shift their career, their income sources, their housing, their family's insurance and possible scholarships, retirement plans, all this stuff, their whole freaking lives. Okay, because they were willing to stand up for themselves and stand up for our freedom and stand up for our ability to make our own decisions in this country. What about all of those people who got fired from serving their country? Like, what even? And, it's not like the repeal of the mandate gives these people their jobs back or reinstates their benefits. Or even if they were to get hired back on, I don't know how that works. It's not like they get compensated for any of this insanity. I just feel like we might be forgiving and forgetting this COVID stuff a little bit too quickly. I mean, there's churches and small businesses and stuff that will never exist again because they couldn't survive the shutdown. And you could sit there and be like, oh, well, it's survival of the fittest. That's how life works. But, most people don't, open a small business or, run a church expecting there to be like required shutdowns for like months at a time, if not longer, depending on the city that they're in. Most people don't like invest all of their livelihoods into something knowing that it's just gonna get like flushed down the drain. Like I don't know, maybe I'm stupid and people do this all the time, but I'm pretty sure they don't. There's young children right now who were either born right before all this COVID stuff or born during it, okay, who are behind in their development because they were holed up at home. Okay, and then when they were taken out into public, everyone around them was wearing a mask and being weird. Okay, like that's kind of one of those things. It's a lasting consequence of, our decisions as a society. And then there's the kids who are like behind, okay, in school, not because they're focusing on things that they enjoy in school and they're falling behind in other subjects, but because, they didn't have school or they didn't have adequate schooling. It was just all online and not everybody learns well online. And it's like a whole thing, okay? Now you've got all these kids who are behind in school. And then on top of that, another thing that I don't feel like people have talked about even remotely enough is the mental health side of things. For as much as we like to talk about mental health now, I'm like, there are people who are no longer alive because some of the things that combat suicidal thoughts, some of the things that help mental health can't just magically happen within the four walls of a house. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a well-known thing that, going outside, being around loved ones, having a solid routine that takes you outside of the home, all of these things, when they're balanced correctly, are things that help mental health. Staying home, being told you can't go anywhere, constantly hearing about and talking about and being reminded of something that like derailed or disrupted your entire life. Those are like things that are notoriously bad for a person's mental health. And I'm not saying that doing any of that stuff, will, in the end combat somebody's, struggle with mental health and vice versa. I'm not saying that not having those things will like condemn somebody to suicide, but I am saying there are things that are proven to help somebody's mental state versus be detrimental to somebody's mental state. So, just something to think about. Okay, we pretty much said screw you if you have mental health problems for like a year and a half, 2 years, depending on where you live. I guess I'm saying that just because we can comfortably live our lives now, for the most part, it doesn't mean that we should just be forgiving and forgetting every little thing that's went down over the last couple years. This stuff was a big deal, okay? The president of the United States straight up said that all the unvaccinated people and their families were going to have a winter of severe illness and death. Like, sir, where do you get off saying that?
For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death for unvaccinated. For themselves, their families, and the hospitals they'll soon overwhelm.
If everyone just gets comfortable again, then we're back in the exact same position that we were pre-COVID. Okay, the same position that allowed all the COVID insanity to even happen. We're back in that complacent, comfortable state, okay, that allowed freaking Dr. Fauci and the powers that be in government control our lives for however long. I'm just saying, it's just I don't want to do that. I don't want to be put in that position again. I don't know about you, but personally, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need it. I don't want it. When we were all in the midst of this COVID stuff, right? I hit a wall. Okay, I hit a wall very hard. I hit it very, very, very hard.
This here is Larry the Cucumber.
I was done, but when I did hit this wall, I had this revelation of sorts. It was an experience, that's for sure. Okay, where I was like, you know what? Now that I think about it, everybody keeps telling me that COVID is doing this to me, that COVID is doing this to my life, that COVID decided that I couldn't go to school anymore because I didn't get vaccinated, that COVID decided that this, that COVID decided that that, and I was like, you know what? COVID is a virus. Like, sorry. COVID is a virus. COVID is not a person. COVID is not the drug dealer down the street. Okay? COVID is a virus. So why am I sitting here letting people tell me that everything that's like, getting screwed up in my life is because of a virus? I'm like, you know what? No. COVID did not do these things to people. People did these things to people. COVID did not cause people to lose their jobs. People caused people to lose their jobs. COVID did not keep me from going to school. People kept me from going to school. It's like that kind of thing, you know? And so I think once you realize that, it's not necessarily a realization that requires you to like all of a sudden start casting blame on people this way and that, because you could do that all day long. Okay, you got Adam and Eve and the blame game going. But I think it is important to acknowledge that none of the restrictions on your life, none of the issues that came out of all the COVID stuff, none of it was done to you by a virus. Okay? It was all decisions that other people made for you or about other things, okay? It was people. People are flawed, but it was people nonetheless. Now, I guess, if you actually got COVID and that's what screwed up your life, then, fair. I mean, I'm sure there's people who would argue that, since people created COVID, that people still did it to you. But, just COVID being a virus in general, okay, you know what? You can blame it on COVID. If you caught COVID and that's what screwed things up for you, then, that's fair. But, okay, in every other aspect of life, it was a virus. Did the virus really did the virus say, "Hey, wear a mask that won't protect you from me. Hey, get a vaccine that won't protect you from me. Hey, get a booster that won't protect you from me." Like, did the virus start speaking? But anyways, I'm not saying that if there were things that frustrated you about the whole experience, or if there was actually things that hurt you, or if you're still dealing with baggage from all of that, I'm not saying that you need to hold on to that baggage and those grudges and that, those terrible feelings for dear life. Okay? I'm not saying you need to hold on to that, because you do need to process your feelings about that stuff. You do need to move on in life. But what I am saying is that, you know, you shouldn't forget what the experience of all this stuff was like for you. Even if it sucks to remember it, okay? Because I've already caught myself forgetting how miserable it actually was at some points. And then I go, "Oh wait, that actually happened. That wasn't like a fever dream, okay? That actually took place." I had this sort of oh my god experience a couple weeks ago, because I was just going about my business, okay? And I don't know what spurred the thought, but I was like, "Oh my god, they wouldn't let me in a junkyard without a mask." And it just was it just hit me, and I was like, "That's freaking insane." Like, what even? That's so weird that that was a thing. And then it just came all flooding back to me, and I was like, I think it might have been early 2021, maybe late 2020. I don't know. It was during winter or spring, I feel like. But I went junkyard shopping with my uncle because we wanted to get a piece for his Durango. And so we were stopping at junkyards in Dallas, Texas. And that was a mistake, I guess, because we stopped at one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other, and none of them would let me in without a mask. And at that point, I had already made the personal decision that I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. So if somewhere wouldn't let me in without one, I didn't go. But it's just so crazy to think back on, because we literally we walked into one of the junkyard places or whatever, we were standing outside, and then we stepped in, and it's literally just a foyer. It's an indoor foyer into the outdoor junkyard, okay? And they were like, "You have to wear a mask to come in here." And I was like, "Well, there's everybody in the junkyard is not wearing one." And it was pretty much just they wanted me to put on a mask to walk through the doorway, pretty much. And I was like, it's just completely illogical, and it just baffled my mind. First of all, a junkyard is not the place you think of when you think, oh, clean, safe, free of diseases, free of, harm. Okay, a junkyard is where you think gross, disgusting. I don't want to touch that. That might give me rabies. But I need a car part. Like, you know what I mean? But anyways, another thing that I've kind of noticed that I forget sometimes is the way that I felt up until I decided to stop wearing masks. I know it's controversial. I know there's plenty of people who even, the it's a hard no on the COVID vaccine, but the masks make sense all the way and whatever. Okay, and I don't really care what it is exactly that you think because, you're going to do whatever you do with your life and I'm going to do whatever I do with mine. But okay, one of the things that I forget is how I felt and how long it took me to figure out why I felt the way I felt. So, when COVID first started or when it became a thing for all of us US people, okay, I was working a fast food job. I was taking classes, dual enrollment classes at the university up the street. I was doing all this stuff. It was my senior year of high school and I had become quite determined to have fun for once. And so I had all these grand plans and notions in my head of I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go do that and whatever. Okay, I was a teenage girl. I particularly liked shopping. I liked going to the mall and thrift shops and stuff. That was all fun to me, okay? And that's what I wanted to do, especially since I had, a job. I had saved up money and I was like, I want to spend it. Let me live my life. But because I was working this fast food job, even though all my, dual enrollment classes, everything went online for the rest of the semester, my part-time job doing daycare at a nearby church, that, just stopped because they stopped meeting. So the only thing that I was really doing outside of the home was working at my fast food job. And so I was wearing a mask at my fast food job. I mean, we didn't for the first week of hysteria, and then they made us do it the next week. And then they were like, never mind, it's your choice. And then they were like, actually, it's required. The whole time, they weren't providing any masks for us. We were walking around with homemade bandana masks that our mom put together with hair ties because we're a bunch of high schoolers trying to follow a dress code that's not even being accurately followed by the managers, But whatever, that's not really my point. My point is that it was hysteria from the beginning, okay? It was illogical from the beginning. It made no sense from the beginning. It just took some of us a few minutes to catch on, and it took some of us a year to catch on, and it took some of us 2 years to catch on, and it'll take some of us a whole lifetime to catch on. That's just the reality of it. But back to me, because this is all about me, okay, and my personal mask situation. Anyways, all throughout the summer, I was going places because things were open-ish. Okay, and by open-ish, I mean very few hours, and there really weren't many people out, and, really it was just teenagers, okay? It was those of us who, couldn't handle staying at home. Anyways, I would go out with friends, we would go shopping, we would attempt movies, we'd do all this stuff, right? And I would wear a mask to go do these things. And for a while, I was like, why do I feel like every time I put on a mask to go do these things, I feel like bursting into tears? I could not pinpoint it. And I was kind of just brushing past it because I was like, whatever it is, it's obviously it's probably just me being overstimulated or overwhelmed with having something on my face. It's not that big of a deal. And I want to go shopping, or I want to, go to this place with my friends, or I want to go into this restaurant for lunch. So, I was just sucking it up and not really thinking too much of it. And then for my birthday that year, I threw an 18th birthday party / graduation party because there's no way that anybody would have really shown up to one if I had had it in, like, May, but I had one during the summer of 2020 when technically we were only supposed to have our immediate family at our houses. There weren't supposed to be, big groups of people or anything, but, I had a decent amount of people show up to my party and it was fun. I had live music, okay, and my best friend flew in from out of state. I had another friend fly in from out of state. It was pretty great considering the circumstances, and thank God for neighbors who can actually mind their own freaking business. That's all I've got to say. But when I had, my friends fly in from out of state and stuff, there was all this time where we were just kind of like hanging out stuck at the house or whatever, and they kind of wanted to go do things. And I was like, that's fair. I kind of want to go do things too. Except for I didn't actually want to go anywhere because I had hit this point where I was just tired of it. I was so tired of it. And the only place I had been recently wearing a mask was when I had to go to work. And anything else, I had just kind of decided I wasn't going to go anywhere else because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to deal with it. But then I had these friends in town and they wanted to go do things and I didn't want to leave them bored. And, I was like, okay, well, you guys want to go shopping? Let's go shopping. And I sucked it up. But I just remember feeling so miserable. Like, we were shopping in probably Ulta and like Rue 21 and like stuff like that. Okay, the whole like strip. And I just remember feeling like I wanted to cry the whole time we were doing that. And so I was trying to be a good host and a good entertainer, but I felt terrible. And, my best friend knows this at this point. We've discussed this many a time. But, I was just not having fun. It was not it for me. I think after that experience, it slowly started to become more clear to me, especially since the following month after that, I quit my fast food job because I was supposed to be going to university, but life is special. Um, anyways, I quit my fast food job, and so I didn't have anywhere that I was required to go where I was required to wear a mask. And I felt this just sense of such extreme relief. Like, I'm not even kidding. I felt so like like I could not believe how calm I felt in comparison to how I had been feeling for months on end. And not to drag this out, but I still had not figured out why I felt so much calmer. Okay, so then a little bit after that, I went down to Panama City Beach with some friends for like a week or so. And to go anywhere there besides the beach, you had to wear a mask. To go into any of the stores or shops or anything like that, you had to wear one. So I did, and I again felt miserable the whole time I was doing it. Like, we would go in a store and I would just like walk back out. As soon as I was like completely uninterested in what was in there, I just left then waited outside because I was like it was not it. It was not it, man. I think it was after that trip that I got back and I started to kind of realize that there was that specific feeling that went along with every time that I put on a mask. It was just that intense urge to burst out in tears. And I was like, where is that coming from? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not like dying, okay? Like, I should be fine, right? And then it kind of became clearer to me over time. I was like, how many other times in my life have I had a physical feeling of discretion against something? And I've gone with it, and I've been right. Pretty much every other time in my memory, okay? Like, where I've had a feeling, a gut feeling, okay, which people say gut feelings are like, just like your intuition, your discretion, or whatever. But as a Christian, I think that part of our discretion comes from the Holy Spirit. I think the Holy Spirit is kind of alongside you every day, and if you feel that little tug of something, okay, the Holy Spirit has been around for a long time now. Okay, if you feel this little tug of like knowing something that you might not be supposed to know or knowing something that you couldn't possibly know because it happened like years and years and years ago, and you just get this like little intuition of something, okay, the Holy Spirit might be cluing you in on something. That's all I'm gonna say there.
I'm gonna go eat some cereal so I don't get confused.
But I'm like, I feel like in this whole time frame, I've been being tugged at with this discretion from the Holy Spirit that I have at my disposal, okay, that I'm supposed to be listening to, and instead I've just been brushing past it because I want to go buy a pair of shoes at the mall. Like, so once I kind of like came upon that realization, I was like, oh, well, now this is a completely different ball game, because now I'm either relying on myself and I'm, just coming up with whatever, or I'm relying on a deeper discretion that's at my disposal. And there is something to this. Ultimately, to this day, I still think that there is something to that. If you disagree, then whatever, that's your prerogative. But I do feel very strongly about the masks. I do feel very strongly about the vaccines. I feel very strongly about pretty much everything COVID related. And a lot of it comes from discretion and prayer and all of that fun stuff that not all of you will believe me about. And, that just has to be what it is, because I've got some pretty insane ideas about the Salem witch trials that you might not believe me on either. But that's just because I feel like I've been led in certain directions, in certain thought processes, and that's where I've landed, and I don't know what else to tell you, because really I can't bring you as another human into my own relationship with the spiritual world, into my own relationship with God. I can't just drag you into that. That's not how it works. I didn't drag myself into it, So you'll just have to figure things out for yourself. You'll have to figure out where God is calling you on certain things, where the Holy Spirit is tugging you in a certain direction. Because I feel like we don't pay attention enough, whether it's COVID related or not. I'm just talking about, like, I feel like we attribute so much to our own guts when it's like our guts are pretty nasty. Maybe we should start attributing like certain feelings to like a higher power, like a discretion of the Holy Spirit. I think we should be doing that. But that is my rant on the whole mask thing. Another thing that I definitely almost completely forgot about is what it felt like when I made that decision to stop wearing a mask. What it felt like going into places where that was expected.
I don't like confrontations!
And especially what that felt like as a teenager going into places where that was expected. Grown adults, people my age, whoever would look at me and be like, you're supposed to wear a mask, right? And I'm like, no, I didn't know. I've never heard of social media. I've never owned a phone. I have never stepped foot outside my house until this day, and I did not know COVID was a thing. Like, what are you expecting me to say to that? I got asked, COVID is like super deadly, right? I'm like, no, I hadn't heard that at all. Like, I just, like, it baffled my mind, the things that people felt the need to ask me. It was very condescending, but I just know that the nerves of walking into a store, being one of the only people or being the only person not wearing a mask and not putting one on as I walked in and just doing whatever it is that I walked in there to do and then leaving, the nerves were so intense. And I find myself forgetting that that was even an experience that I had, but it was. And so I always thought it was funny. People would be like, don't you know you're supposed to wear a mask, or why don't you just put on a mask? I'm like, you know what? If I feel strongly enough about this to put myself through the torture of possibly being screamed at or yelled at or talked to or lectured, I think that I'm not going to put one on. Like, I obviously feel very strongly about this. So what makes you think that saying, hey, by the way, there's a thing called COVID, here's a mask. What do you think? Like, what do you think that's gonna do? Like, at some point, just give up, But yeah. So the nerves, big deal. The nerves. Plus, that stuff lasting impact on your body, okay? You gotta work that stuff out. You know? Like, those nerves, those experiences, those physical things, they stay with you in your body until you, like, process them. So, like, those are things you need to remember in order to process them, not to, like, hold them hostage in your body forever, but, the opposite. Anyways, I'm pretty sure a small part of people was enjoying all of it. And don't take that the wrong way. I'm talking about, like, how a little kid turns, like, every rain shower into a freaking life-threatening tornado, okay? Because they're genuinely scared, or because it's fun for them to play pretend like it's the end of the world and they need to go into survival mode and pack up all the blankets and all the pillows and carry them outside onto the playground set in the backyard up into the little, like, tiny little fort area and hunker down because it's the end of the world. Like, I'm talking that type of situation. Like, for little kids, sometimes exaggerating things into this, oh my god situation can be fun. And I think for a lot of adults, a lot of people, that's kind of how they played COVID. But I guess my question here, okay, in general, is what is going to go down in the history books? Before I go down any rabbit holes as far as my views on history go, I just want to clarify the difference between our general, like, world history, nation history, whatever, okay, and the history presented to us in the Bible. As far as that goes, I don't believe that God would allow the masses to be so misled as to believe the Bible is truth, if it wasn't. Like, I don't think that God would allow that. I don't think that that would line up with, his goal to save our souls, like, so I don't think he would allow the Bible to be misleading, so I think that there is truth, and then that is truth. However, I have differing views when it comes to, like, other history books. But when I walk into a small bookstore, okay, in some downtown area of Pennsylvania, and I see the whole display of new releases is dedicated to COVID themed books, I get a little bit like, oh, great. And then I see that all of the books practically are written by left wing journalists. And then I get frustrated because I'm thinking, these are the accounts that people are going to reference in 100 years. These books are what my great-grandkids are going to find in a used bookstore and use for their history report on COVID. Like, that's insane to me. And, and it's not just COVID either. I think there's a lot of media bias that goes into covering cultural events and practically everything else as well. And it's kind of concerning. It's also why I find it funny when people think that we truly know all the facts about our own history from 50 years ago, much less Civil War or World War II times. Like, you don't think there were different perspectives on the historical events that happened? Like, don't even get me started on the historical accounts of individuals that we pretend to know are factual. All the anecdotal stuff. It'd be like me going through my 14-year-old journals, okay, where practically all I talked about was boys. Okay, but it would be like me going through those journal entries and saying everything in this journal is historical account, it's historical fact, because I was there when it happened and I wrote down stuff about it. And it's like, no, because we all have different perspectives of the things that happen to us. And maybe it's just me. Maybe 14-year-old me in my journals, maybe I'm the only liar that exists. Maybe I'm the only one who has ever had a different perspective on a situation than the other person who was involved in that situation. Maybe that's the case. Or maybe humans are flawed and not everything we say or write down is accurate. Maybe we're not capable of being objective, especially in how we recount past and current events. Ever think about that? Another thing that kind of frustrates me as a conservative is the right's response to all of this type of stuff. Like, the GOP doesn't do anything with their resources to combat the left, if you ask me. Like, the Republican Party, okay, really does not that much. Can we admit that? Is that okay? Is that, like, not... Can I not say that? But I don't know. It just often seems to me that the left, they know how important having an impact in media, having an impact in history, having an impact in Hollywood, they know how important that is, how vital that is. And the right just doesn't seem to care all that much. I mean, after the last couple years, we are seeing different companies and organizations like the Daily Wire or PragerU backing up more right-wing or neutral entertainment content, but still, one side way outweighs the other as far as influence goes. Just seeing things like that display in that bookstore in Pennsylvania, okay, it just makes me think these are the things, the documentaries of our time, the books, the articles, all this stuff. These are the things that people will look back on as our nation's history. Okay, whether or not things are completely accurate. Because, you can't do anything to control that. Which was the same in the past. Just saying that. Okay, but these are the things that people will look back on and say, that's what happened. If you have a story that divulges from the mainstream coverage of this stuff, okay, if your experience with COVID doesn't fit what's being written, what's being cranked out, okay, because the left is putting money into this for a reason. If you have a narrative, if you have a story that doesn't fit what's being published about that experience, then think about what your grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to be pulling for primary sources on these topics when they're in school 50 years from now. Okay, do you want them to have a skewed narrative? Do you want them to have the other side of the aisle's narrative? Or do you want them to have your story? Do you want them to understand what it was like for you? Whether what it was like for you is the same as what it was like for me or completely different, it doesn't matter, okay? But even for people on the left, I doubt their story completely lines up with what the, CNN journalists are writing about. And it's like, okay, well, what do you do to combat that? Write it down. Record it. Preserve it. Conserve it, okay? Be a conservative in your own right as far as historical accounts go. Because if you don't write down your experiences, if you don't share your experiences, you're going to forget them at some point, or you're gonna lose certain parts of it and you're gonna have to fill in the blanks, right? And nobody after you is going to know what you experienced. And so, I don't know. I just think if that's important to you, if it's important to you that your children or even you 20 years from now remember what it was actually like for you, you're gonna have to do something about it on your own, because nothing that's being written about it, nothing that's really being recorded in media is going to encapsulate your experience. So just, food for thought or whatever. I don't know. We need a better expression than that. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Y'all know the drill. New episodes of Subtle Rampage air every Wednesday morning, and you can follow the podcast on social media at Subtle Rampage Podcast. Have a good week, and I'll see ya.